we are going to examine three very simple ideas that we're going to come across in fractions, and that is proper fractions, improper fractions, and mixed fractions. And we're going to see what the difference is between them by using some simple examples. So first of all, we're going to start off with proper fractions. And an example of a proper fraction can be shown by just making a shape, breaking it into thirds, and colouring in one piece. This would be 1/3, as we already know. This is what we'd call a proper fraction. It's a regular fraction, if you like, and it is written and noted down properly. Hence, it's called a proper fraction. Then, if we coloured in one more fraction piece, we would then have 2/3. Again, it's still properly written, as we're used to. It is a proper fraction. Now, if we colour in the third piece, we could record it as 3/3, but it is now no longer a proper fraction. And the reason for this is it's not the proper way that we would write down this number. So we call it an improper fraction, because the proper way to write this number would be 1, because 3/3 is the same as 1 whole, and that's the simplest and most proper way to write it. And so we call that the proper number. Let's now continue counting up by thirds, and so to do this, I'll draw another shape broken up into thirds, and if I colour in just one more piece, you can see I now have 4/3. And again, this is an improper fraction. And the reason for that is that we can rename it and call it more properly as 1 1/3. And 1 1/3 is now the next idea that we're talking about. This is called a mixed fraction. And the reason it's called a mixed fraction is it is a mix between a whole number, which is the number 1 that is large at the front, and a proper fraction, which is the 1/3 that is next to it. So it's 1 1/3. It's a mix of whole numbers and fraction, or proper fractions. And we can continue this process on by counting on and on. So let's add another third to our shapes here. So now we have 5/3. So we can see with our labelling along the bottom, 5/3 is an improper fraction because of course it is more properly named as 1 2/3, a mixed fraction of whole numbers and proper fraction. Now if we continue the process and colour in another third on our shapes above, we now clearly have 6/3 coloured in, an improper fraction, and we could also record that as 1 3/3. So the first whole coloured in light blue, and then 3/3 in the second whole. This is still an improper fraction because 3/3 is not the simplest or most proper way to write the fraction for 3/3, because 3/3 is indeed 1 whole. So the mixed fraction, well, it's actually not mixed, is 2. So that's the proper way to write the number shown in the picture on the screen as just 2 wholes, or 2. So it's not actually mixed because there is no fraction partner with this whole number. So we can't call it a mixed fraction, and technically it's not really a fraction, is it? Because it's a whole number. Let's continue the process again. It will add some more thirds on. So we'll start by putting a shape on the screen, cut into thirds, and we'll just colour in one extra third. And again, we have 7/3 now, an improper fraction. If we recorded this as 1 4/3, so we counted the far left shape as a whole and counted each of the remaining thirds as 4, it's correct to call it 1 4/3, but it's not the proper way to do it. So we call it an improper fraction. And if we convert as many of these thirds into wholes as we can see we can make 2 wholes and 1/3, and this is a mixed fraction, a mix between wholes and fractions in the number. Continuing on, of course, we get the idea. This would become 8/3 by colouring in another piece. It's the same as 1 5/3 if we look closely, but it's still improper. And to properly record this, it would be 2 2/3, a mixed fraction between whole numbers and a proper fraction partner. And lastly, if we colour in the remaining part of the shape, we of course have 9/3, which is the improper fraction. We could record it as 1 whole and 6/3, which is still improper. And it's a mixed improper fraction, but it's improper. Same, we could call this 2 3/3, and again, this would be improper. And the mixed fraction that we would be correctly recording it as is 3 wholes. But of course, we can see that technically it's not mixed because there's no fraction partner with it, so we can't call it mixed. And it's not really a fraction because it's a whole number. Now, of course, I've just run through examples using thirds, but this is just to illustrate how proper, improper, and mixed fractions work, and this is the case for all fraction types.